My name is Cole, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I basically just go to the gym, read, and go on bad dates, and I know your lives are infinitely more interesting than that. So, what I thought I could do was guide you on your reading journey and help you figure out which books are worth it and which books you can absolutely leave on the shelf. This week, we are going to talk about my top 10 favorite reads of 2024. I'm going to already start this out by breaking my own rules and lead with an honorable mention title. And that honorable mention title is Ghost Roots. It is a collection of Nigerian stories, and it is so captivating. It was shortlisted for the National Book Award and absolutely deservedly so. I still think about these stories. There's one in particular that I was just thinking about, and it was so vibrant in my mind, I thought, oh, well, it has to have happened at the end of the collection. No, it was like halfway through. The title of the story is 24 Alhaji Williams Street, and it is this story about how death has basically come to this street, and it is taking out the children house by house. And the main story is about one of the boys at the end of the block, and they death is getting closer and closer, and it's the story about how the matriarchs of the family basically attempt to rescue him and save him from this impending death that keeps coming down the street. When you really unpack that and you think about Nigeria and the different struggles, it really stands to reason that this is probably about a much larger theme of what's happening in that country. And I think it was handled with such care and such just literary perfection. um, Yes, I loved this collection. It is generally, for the most part, all about motherhood and the way that mothers relate to children, the way they relate to motherhood in general, and then the struggles that come along with that. I really could not recommend this collection higher. Ghost Roots is my honorable mention pick for my top 10 this year. Okay, starting the big list. Number 10 is going to be Stoneyard Devotional. Stoneyard Devotional was shortlisted for the National Book Award, and it is set in Australia. It is about this woman who is deciding to kind of like abandon her life and goes to live on this religious commune. And she thinks she's going to stay for just a little bit, but ends up staying for a really long time. And while she's there, she's forced to look at her life and look at her choices and really start to unpack everything that brought her to this commune and basically to this moment in her life. It's fascinating. And one of the literary devices that they use to kind of force this introspection is this infestation of mice. And as the mice slowly start infiltrating everything in the commune, including the cars, it's paired with the level of introspection that the main character is kind of forced or is choosing to unwrap. And I think it's done really brilliantly. And those two ideas really come in hand in hand. There's also a woman that comes to this commune who is from the narrator's past, and it really forces this really interesting dissection of youth and follies of our youth and how we behaved as children in ways that we might be embarrassed as adults, and how does that impact us and how does that impact the victim in certain situations. And it's handled really interestingly. All of that to say, the book is very quiet, it's very reserved, it's very peaceful in the way that it's approached, and I think it's done really well. Number 9 on my list is Our Evenings by Alan Hollinghurst. Y'all, I loved this book. It handles a really complex tale with such streamlined care. I felt taken care of as I was going through this work, and I felt respected as a reader, and I felt challenged as a reader. I thought it was great. Now, that said, it moves along at a like steady pace. Like, you're not going to pick this up and be whisked away from like some propulsive, trajectory through the way that the book is crafted. But your hand is held, and it feels like you're like given a nice warm hug as you move through it. It is about a economically challenged, I would say, like character, and how he moves through the world and he becomes this actor, and how he then relates to his past, and how his past comes to meet him, and these conflicting ideas, and how you know someone when they're younger and then they become someone else, and what is that, how does that impact you as an adult, and then how do you then reflect on the past in that way. He's gay, and it's handled with such just like I don't know, like reserved gayness, and not in like a, oh, we don't talk about it, but in like a respectful kind of aged gayness. There's also this really juicy part where the boy's mother meets this other woman, and they have this like lovely, like tawdry, like lesbian relationship. And it's really great. I love the way it's handled, and I love the way we brought in a different queer element. So like that's what I'm saying. Like it's very gay, but it's handled in a way that I think really works and is really like dynamic. Number 8 is All Fours by Miranda July. Y'all. This book was shortlisted for the National Book Award. And at first I was surprised. I had some girlfriends who had read it and they had told me that it was about sex, and they were like, yeah, it's fine. It's like a fun beach read, but it didn't seem very literary to them. So I was like, okay, well, like maybe it's on my to be read list, but like we'll see. And then it was shortlisted for the National Book Award, and I was like, okay, well, I guess like I need to read it. I read it. I got through part 1 and I was like, what is this? I don't get it. Like there are parts of it I like actively didn't enjoy, and I was like, get on with it. And then I got to part 2, and the whole book came into focus for me, and I got it. And the longer I have spent away from it, the deeper I have learned to respect it and like understand it even more. Regardless of what anyone has told you about this book is about the perimenopausal experience and begs the question, what would happen if you gave in to every impulse and erratic desire that accompanies the perimenopausal experience? And listen, I am not a woman and I will not be going through perimenopause, but I could imagine that it's something that I would want literature on, that I would, meaning like a work of fiction. Like, why are we not talking about this? Like, we never talk about that type of stuff. And like, this book does it, and it attacks it head on, and it does it in this really incredible way that is so unapologetic. And I think is hopefully going to force this really interesting conversation around that period in women's lives, because we also are all interacting with women at a different point in time who are going through this experience. And I just think it's really well done. That said, there are a couple cringy moments. Like I understand that Miranda July, a lot of her work involves some sort of movement or dance, or like that's like a theme in some of her work. I'll be completely honest, this is the first novel of hers I've ever read. And that's great. In this particular work, all of the movement stuff is super cringy. And I think that the way that the protagonist relates to the movement work is also like hyper cringy. And so that gave me the ick. But everything outside of that, 10 out of 10, loved it. It's really special. Okay, number 7 is Sally Rooney's Intermezzo. Okay, I understand that I might get in trouble for this, but this is my first Sally Rooney. I know. It's because I started watching the Normal People TV show, and I was just like, and didn't really get it. So, but everybody loves Normal People. Everybody compares every subsequent work of hers to Normal People. So I will read that in 2025 and we can talk about it. But Intermezzo, I loved it. I thought it was so great. And now that said, if you've not started it, the there are two brothers that it's basically about, and the first brother, Peter, she writes in a very specific way, and it is not how the rest of the book is. And I think if I had to go back and like really analyze the entire book and the way she writes that character throughout the entire piece, is that she writes him that way when he is in an altered state. And I think the beginning, he is a little bit heavier in his like drug use than at different points later in the book. And if I had to guess, that's why she wrote it that way. So if you've started it and it hasn't quite picked up for you, my guess is that's why. And same, I started reading the first of it and I was like, oh, and I'd never read her. I was like, people like this. And I was like, I had to assume that people just like us thought it like made them feel smart or something. I was like, I don't get it because it's choppy and it's there's like odd juxtaposition of sentence after sentence and it just doesn't work. Um, but it's because of it's just the way she wrote that one character. So stick with it, keep it going. It will pay off. So yeah, I really loved that. Okay, number 6, which it might be controversial, but hear me out. I read a lot of good books this year. So stay with me. Number 6 is the National Book Award winner, James by Percival Everett. Y'all, I love Percival Everett. If you have not read The Trees, you should absolutely pick it up. I think it was an incredible piece of work. James, for those of you who haven't read it, is a retelling of Huckleberry Finn from the perspective of Jim, the enslaved person. And in this book, you find out that his name is James through this retelling. And I think it was very successful. I think it was a great book. I do think it sagged a little bit in the middle, like unnecessarily. I also think that maybe there are certain pieces of it that felt a little confined by the original, where we could have felt a little bit looser boundary. And I don't think we would have lost anything. I think, in fact, we would have gained something. Yeah. And again, and because of that, I think that there are aspects of it that worked better in concept than execution. But that's, again, being hypercritical. I did love the book. I thought that the ending, the very ending, was a really cool, and I thought that it was really empower. I thought it was really powerful and impactful. Just try saying both those at the same time, and then you'll get that little weird bobble. Um, but I also would have loved for it to have built a little bit differently. And I think we could have built it there in a way that would have had even more impact. But again, I felt like maybe we were being tied to like the original story. So yeah, I don't know, but I really did love this book. Okay, now we're into top 5 territory. My number 5 favorite read from 2024 is Kairos. Kairos won the International Booker Prize. I think it was originally written in German. Y'all, it is a story about this May December romance. And I think that Jenny Erpenbeck handles that, like, the romance piece of it so expertly, because she like delves into what each of the characters is thinking and then presents it in such a way that it's like right at the time that you as a human would be wondering, like, what is this person thinking, what do they think about this, what do they think about that, and then, like, just like that, the weird little bits of insecurity or curiosity that you have whenever you're starting to get to know someone. And I think she just crafts it in this way that's so relatable and so intriguing, and like really endears at least me to both characters. There's an incredible twist at the very end that just really makes you want to go back and start reading it all the way over from the beginning to see, like, is there some way I could have like figured this out, or like how did these actions, did this give this away, and like how did this impact this. I also think she so expertly captures the tension and a lot of the conflict that happens in this relationship, and it just helps bring it all to life in this really authentic 360-degree way. Love, 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 love. Highly, highly recommend. All right. Number 4 in my favorite reads of 2024 is the Booker shortlist title, The Safekeep. Y'all, this is the sapphic novel of the year. I am telling you, okay, I read this while I was at the gym, and I was on the treadmill and I had to put it away. I was I was blushing. I was getting nervous that like everybody could tell that, well, like what I was reading. It was a lot. And it's, not something that you would maybe stereotypically think would like ignite me. And yet here we are. I think that the writing was really beautiful. I thought it told a really interesting story. I think the protagonist is so complicated and crunchy and like conflicted in the way she's moving through space. And it's like a fascinating exploration of things and when things matter, and like objects and like possessions, and like when they matter and when they shouldn't, and when they do and why, and like really getting to the heart of that. And while that's happening, the protagonist is also dealing with like her own acceptance and the way she's perceived and the way she perceives herself. And it's just really great. I had a friend who thought that there's a bit of a twist, and she thought that it was projected a little too soon. And while I don't disagree, it wasn't projected in a way that made me feel like I lost anything. Does that make sense? Like if you're reading a mystery or a thriller and it's like, building to this big climax and then but you can tell from a mile away what it's going to be, then it feels like a letdown. This wasn't that. I felt like even though you could kind of see what was going to happen, I didn't feel like it was like being led and driven to that moment. I feel like it was a part of the story, but it was not like the reason to read the book, if that makes any sense. And so for that reason, it didn't necessarily negatively impact me. Love, love, love the safe keep. Okay, top three territory. My third favorite book of 2024 was My Friends. And this title was longlisted for the Booker and shortlisted for the National Book Award. I would have to double check. Don't call me a liar. I'll have to double check that. Um, I loved it. It is this meditation on friends and family and the role that those two very important relationships play in our lives, when they play different roles in our lives, and why. The protagonist grows up in Benghazi and then ultimately moves to London and is going to school and gets involved in this protest, and there's this explosion, and it really kind of sets off, I think, this like train of events about like looking at his life and contemplating what's important and developing these really empowering and impactful friendships along the way. And it's a really interesting exploration of like what you share and what you feel like you can share with friends and what you feel you can and can't share with family. And this book was just so wonderful. And I love the attention that it got. And I think it's absolutely worth a read. Okay. Second favorite book of 2024 made me realize how much I love when poets write fiction. Y'all, and this is Kaveh Akbar's Martyr. There are some books that like the plot points are super important and that's what you take away and that's what you remember. And there are some books that what you remember is how they made you feel. And that is one of those books for me. Every time I would sit down to read it, it felt like this like reverent reading experience. It was like almost meditative in the way that I would engage with it and the way that I felt like I was being engaged with as the reader. It is so powerful. It is about this queer man who is, I think, in like roughly middle age, who is basically coming of age and is like learning about himself and the way that they fit into the world and what is life and what is their life and how do they perceive both of those things. And it's really wonderful. At some point, he comes to New York, and that's a huge thrust of the book. And I think it's a great exploration of like life and uncovering what's important to us. The ending, okay, so, my one piece of advice: find someone who has already read it and put them on notice because the minute you finish it, you will want to talk to someone about it. You'll be like, what do you think happened at the end? This is what I think. Could you believe this? What happened? Like, how is this like, how does this relate to this other piece of the story? I finished it and I immediately needed to discuss it. I cannot speak highly enough of this book. I think it was shortlisted for the National Book Award. Absolutely deserving. I think that this was just a really, really special work. And I cannot wait for Kaveh Akbar to write more novels. Love, love, love. All right. My favorite read of 2024. Okay. Again, breaking the rules a little bit because screw rules. This book was published at the very end of 2023, but it's a honker and a half, and there's no way with everything going on at the end of the year that I could have read the entire thing. So I'm giving it to myself as a 2024 read because that's when I finished it. It is Jan Foss's Septology. And I'm holding it like this because the front of the book like doesn't, it has the names of like the sections. This, now listen, not for the faint of heart. And also, that said, there's not a single period in the book. I know. There's not a period. I it is a meditation on life, love, art, sex, duality, addiction, like everything juicy that you could imagine. I feel like it delves into it, but not in a preachy way, in a very like esoteric, like windy, expert way. It is an opus. I feel that like I hope that the author feels that this is an opus and they can just sit and like revel in their brilliance, least for a short period of time. I don't know them. I don't know much about the author, to be very honest with you. I don't know if they're kind. I don't know anything else, but like the output of their work really impacted my life. I think they won the Nobel Prize in 2023, which like hello, if you read it, I think you get it. Um this I cannot speak highly enough about it. I will say it's not for everyone. It is a journey, it is a commitment, it is dense, and it requires thought and attention, but I really feel that every word was worth it. Yeah, I cannot speak highly enough about Septology. So okay, those were my top 10 books of 2024. I want to know what you all read in 2024. What were your favorites? And then eventually we can get a little sassy and talk about the ones we didn't like from 2024, because we also have a little growing list about those too. Yeah. What are you planning to read in 2025? I really want to know, because my to be read list continues to change because like every time I walk into a bookstore, I like buy a new book. So I want to know what you all are reading in 2025. And yeah, I'm excited to read some books together and keep talking about them.